And it's really about reconnecting with our own and one another's humanity.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to today's session of Views from the Field. We have a very honored special guest, Stephanie Bachmann Mattei, who's with us, who's done a lot of work with nonviolent communications, and we'll talk about her biography and get to know Stephanie a little bit more in a bit. First, I would like to just mention that these sessions are community supported. And I am community supported, especially through these sessions. So any donations that anybody might choose to make is deeply appreciated. We have a link in the video description. So thank you in advance if you choose that. So Stephanie, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Alan, for inviting me.
Of course, my pleasure. I'd like to just share that you have recently written a book, which is available for pre-order, called The Heart of Nonviolent Communication, 25 Keys to Shift from Separation to Connection. And I'm particularly interested in that shift from separation to connection, because it's always been my feeling that the separation is an illusion. We're always connected in some way. So we'll look forward to hearing about that. And it's available on Amazon, I believe, from pre-order, and will be out April 1st. I've had the opportunity to read it, not in its entirety, but a good bit of it. And I can absolutely say it's so impressive in the wisdom that you bring to it. And your co-author, Kristen's last name is?
Collier.
The wisdom and insights towards nonviolent communication in Marshall Rosenberg's work is profound. And if anybody is interested in NVC, it's an absolute must read. As a way of introduction, I just want to touch on a few points of your path. You're a certified trainer and assessor with the Center for Nonviolent Communication, an advanced teacher with the Right Use of Power Institute, offering organizational trainings to raise awareness of the power dynamics intrinsic in all relationships, moving to share a heartfelt approach to power. So this is interesting to me because I'm not familiar with the Institute. So my first question, right within the middle of your introduction and bio, is what is the format for these trainings? And maybe if you could just say a few words towards them.
So the Right Use of Power Institute is an institute based here in the US, but branches out all over the world. And we have teachers from all over, the world, but it's still kind of a small organization. And so they have a core training that lasts 4 days, where you are introduced to the principles. And then there is a teacher training that lasts several months. So with different modules, mentoring, a small cohort. So I have done the full path to become a teacher, an affiliated teacher, and am now on the track to also become core faculty with the Institute.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. And it's interesting because I think of you in that NVC framework, and and now I also think of you, of course, as a certified MBSR teacher through the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness. It's been my great honor to mentor you and be mentored by you in that process. Thank you. And you hold a research degree in philosophy from the University of Florence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
That was one of my, very first introductions to meditation in my early 20s, I met an Indian yoga master, Swami, from Rishikesh lineage. And so I was blessed enough to navigate my university years and my dissertation focusing on Indian philosophy and yoga, and Samkhya in particular.
Okay, well, that's part of the journey that I'm going to ask you about.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it began right there, maybe it began a little earlier, but it's evolved to you currently traveling the globe, as an assessor for NVC teachers, along with, of course, teaching NVC.
Yes.
And most recently, you've been involved with the work in India.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
India, China, South America. Now the traveling has obviously just resumed slowly now because of COVID, but yeah, I used to travel quite a lot and loved that.
Yeah, well, I'm happy it's picking up again for all of us. So let's come back to the journey. Where does it begin for you? Any part of this work which then leads you into the university and the lineage that you are beginning to describe?
Well, I guess for me, the way I have made sense of my life and my journey is that this, my spiritual journey started in my early teens when I wanted to really take ownership of my religion. So I was, born and raised Christian. And so as a teen, I said, okay, I don't want to just be a Christian because my parents taught me, but I want to, really understand and make a choice around that. So I started to intentionally look for guidance within the monasteries, in Florence. I was knocking at doors asking, okay, how do I pray? How do I meditate? What is contemplation? All of those questions. And to tell you the truth, I didn't receive the guidance that I was hoping for. And so my studies led me to a particular form of contemplation from the ancient Christian monks, hesychasm, which is still alive in the Orthodox tradition, but it's completely male-oriented. So women cannot even go to Mount Athos or to get the guidance. So here I was, wanting to learn more. And that is when I came to know about a Swami in Geneva, Switzerland. And so I took a train and went to see her. And that started my journey with yoga.
Oh, wow. So you went from an exploration of Christian Orthodox teachings to the Swami. And how did you meet the Swami through that?
Somebody told me, actually, it was my philosophy teacher in high school that told me of the existence of this Swami. So, I was 20 when I took the train and went to meet with her, and that started a whole journey. So went to India with her, lived in ashram, while, as I said, also worked on my dissertation.
I'm curious, what was your dissertation in?
So officially it was history of religions, and my topic was Indian philosophies, and in particular of the 6 systems of philosophy within the Indian thought, the 3 schools of yoga, Samkhya and Vedanta. So going back to the non-separation, non-duality.
What happens after college?
Well, I moved to the US because my husband and I chose to marry, and he is Italian as I am, but he was already living here. So we made the choice for me to, leave and come over. And so that's where, quite a, on one hand, a different journey started. And on the other hand, for me, it's, there is a thread. So getting, acculturated to the US and navigating cultural differences and then starting a family and, learning about, for me, motherhood has always been, a spiritual journey in its own right. Yeah. And then moving to Massachusetts, 2010, I then came to know about IMS. So Insight Meditation Society was like 45 minutes from my home. And that's when I started my, my exposure to the Buddhist teachings. And that is also when I had, again, it was 40 minutes to get to UMass. And so that's when I started my first 8 weeks MBSR course as a participant, because I was struggling psychologically, because we had been moving quite often, had consistently lost all the support and rebuilt support systems, and the move to Massachusetts was particularly difficult. So that's when I was finding support and groundedness in MBSR.
Where in Massachusetts did you live? I'm curious because I'm from Boston and Newton and Concord.
Groton, in the Groton area.
Oh, okay, yeah, wonderful. So is that where NVC is introduced into the mix, or no, way before that?
Yes. NVC got introduced when my oldest son, who is now 25, was 4. Oh. And I was a La Leche League leader, so a breastfeeding counselor within that organization. And I was reading about this guy, Marshall Rosenberg, who was invited at the International La Leche League conference as the main speaker, the keynote speaker. And my husband and I didn't go to that conference, but I was reading that he was actually traveling to war-torn countries. Mm-hmm. And so I still remember, I was with my magazine, my Little League magazine, going to the bathroom where my husband was brushing his teeth. And I said, okay, we need to go to New York and meet this guy. And this is what we did. And that started the NVC journey. So 21 years ago.
21 years ago. And now you're dealing with the heart of the matter in your book and the 25 key distinctions. That's letting us into the world of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg in a way that I think few people know. So moving to that heart of the matter and your book, you write, if I may quote, and I may have, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing a little, looking into the factors that would support humans in staying connected to compassion, Marshall Rosenberg identified 3 main aspects: language, thinking, and the specific strategies we are conditioned to rely upon to meet our needs. Based on the historical principles of nonviolence, nonviolent communication emerged in Rosenberg's words as an integration of a spirituality with concrete tools for manifesting it in our daily lives, our relationships, and in our political activities. Okay, there's a lot there that we could unpack. And the question I have, which I'd like to invite you to read a poem that we heard you read a little while ago, is before we began this recording, might help answer that question, and then maybe you can expand on it. So the question is, how do you view the spirituality he is referring to?
So I'll start by sharing the poem, which is called From Now On, and was written by Marshall Rosenberg many, many years ago. From now on, I choose to dream my own dreams so that I can fully taste the mystical excitement of being human. From now on, I choose to empathically connect with others so that I can fully respect the unique and holy experience to be found in each person every moment. From now on, I choose to have my actions flow from connection with nature and to direct my attention where it supports this flow. From now on, I choose to be aware of the unchosen, dehumanizing thoughts that my culture planted within me, and to prevent them from leading me into robot-like violent actions. From now on, I choose to openly reveal what is alive within me, even though others may not appreciate the gift. From now on, when wearing a title of authority, I choose to be aware that reaching frontiers before others never justifies punitive means to influence them to join me. From now on, I choose to believe that the failure of our needs to be fulfilled results from insufficient dialogue and creativity rather than scarcity.
So how does this transmission, this invitation, this declaration from Dr. Marshall Rosenberg land for you in the way that you know him, knew him? And how does it land for you within your work now? Big question.
Yeah, this poem for me really captures the core pieces of what I understand NVC to be about, so nonviolent communication. And it's really about reconnecting with our own and one another's humanity and see the mystical excitement of being human. So really reconnecting with our authenticity, vitality, and how important it is to connect with others and with nature. And I love what he writes here, to direct my attention where it supports this flow, which for me speaks exactly of mindfulness, right? Of being mindful. Okay, where am I directing my attention, and am I a choice around where I am directing my attention? And where choice, is absence is when we are in this robot-like, conditioned state where we just follow what we have learned through socialization, through acculturation, but are not mindfully choosing. And so really making this distinction, which for me is very much in line with, the whole MBSR curriculum, and the core of it being, really seeing what is reactivity and what is a response. So having that choice, that space to connect with our authenticity and ability to make choices. And another big theme here is, when speaking of authority. So in NVC, we talk about shifting from power over to power with. So rather than, choosing force and coercion, and this is part of also the work with the right use of power. So just hearing the word power, what happens in your body, and what are some of the associations that we all carry within, right? So there is such distrust around power and fear around authority. Why? Because we all got punished, parents, teachers, it's with the best of intention, but how we have been educated is through threats and punishment and shaming. And so how can we influence, so still stay in our own power without overpowering others and serve life? So that is the shift from power over to power with. And what I enjoy with the right use of power is that it gives language to the various dimensions of power. And with language, once again, awareness awakens, because I cannot be aware of what I cannot even name.
I'm curious, it brings up a sense of non-dualism. And how is that seen, and how do you see us working with life in a non-dual way, given that there is a certain power differential in just about everything?
Yeah. So for me, it's really, cultivating an awareness of what, in my understanding of the Buddhist approach, is the distinction between, the relative dimension and the absolute dimension.
Mm-hmm.
So on the relative dimension, yes, there are power dynamics. You are male, I'm female. Right there, we have a power dynamic. Now, here we happen, at least from what I can see, we are all white, but there are racial power differences. You are my mentor, so there is a role difference. I'm your mentee. So all of those aspects, and yet NVC reminds us that as human beings, we all share the same needs. So deep down, we all want, our hearts long for the same things, regardless of culture, geography, status, social location. So holding both pieces without bypassing either can support us, in my experience, to really look at, where the separation is conditioned and how we can actually overcome it and look deeper.
How does that longing for the same thing show up in teaching MBSR? Is it explicit? Is it implicit? Do you name it? If you name it, how do you name it? I have a word for it.
Well, I guess, for MBSR, it's really the desire for well-being. We all long to experience well-being, to be happy, right? Yeah. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and in MBC?
In MBC, I work a lot with parents. So usually I ask parents, what do you dream of for your children and for your family? And regardless of where I teach in the world, I do get the same answers. We all want for our children to be happy, to be healthy, to be able to navigate life, whatever happens, to have to experience love and friendship and support. So those are all, qualities of life that we treasure as human beings.
Yeah, and even in love, that power differential between two people, between in a family unit, mother and child, and that longing for unconditional love, that we get from I get from my 16-year-old dog.
Yes.
Shows up. So moving from that to the concrete, which Dr. Rosenberg speaks of, and that you write so eloquently about and wise with Kristen, your co-teacher, co-author, the 25 keys of distinction. What can you say about those in general as to how you came to them and your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I didn't come to those key differentiations. Those are, at least a core of those really came from Marshall directly. And although he didn't write anything specific on that, those were, core pieces that he would share in his teachings. So wherever he would be, sharing NVC, he would touch upon some of those distinctions to actually point to, how is it that we are conditioned? So again, going back to the initial quote that you were reading from the book, so the language and the thinking and how they feed each other, right?
Right.
So I'm conditioned to think in certain terms and to speak. And when I speak, I reinforce the thinking, and the thinking reinforces the speech. So those conditioned ways, and how we can stay more connected to what he would define, at least in my understanding, our true nature, which for him was compassion, was the desire to contribute to life. And so, historically, some of us slowly refined other key distinctions that are part of the explorations that we invite candidates, so people who want to become certified trainers with the Center for Nonviolent Communication, to ponder and see how they apply in their lives, because those are not cognitive, exercises, but really inform day-to-day life.
Yeah. And is it, my understanding is, and is it true that this is the first time these key distinctions have been compiled?
In a book, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there have been another couple of books that I'm aware of by certified trainers in nonviolent communication published. One was several years ago, and it is called Cracking the Code by Liv Larson. And then there is another book that came out a few years ago, which is called Choice. It's a smaller book, by also 2 certified trainers in NDC.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're putting them together in the way that you have is quite brilliant. So again, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, one main vision that I had for the book was to really uphold both the spirituality of NVC with also the social change applications, because oftentimes, we can forget about that. And there is this sometimes misunderstanding that NVC is a practice intrapersonal and interpersonal, but the social dimension is not as highlighted. So for me, it was important to bring that to the forefront as well.
Yes, especially now, it seems like. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit. First, I'm wondering, are there 1 or 2 key distinctions that you can share with us, and maybe just add a few words to? Maybe 1 or 2 of your favorites. Sorry to put you on the spot if I am.
No, well, maybe, really going back to the poem that I shared, and that particular sentence that this morning is particularly touching my heart, to direct my attention where it supports this flow. So one key distinction is life alienating and life, connected. And so Marshall makes this distinction of what is it that, disconnects us from life, and what is it that connects us to life. And so when we can, discern that, then we can be a choice on where to direct our attention. And so really all those 25 key differentiations are intertwined. And for me, they all go back to that, which could be one of the, root key differentiations. So it's really to become more aware of, what is connected to life and what is disconnected, and make a choice around it without making one necessarily right and the other wrong, because otherwise we stay in the same mindset of, separation, of duality.
Yes, very often. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, can I just give a concrete example so that?
Please.
Just going. I mean, you have repeated, graciously a few times here also on this call and between the 2 of us, that you have held our mentoring sessions as, mutually enriching. So that for me is part of the, the life-giving. So it's, if you had the stance that you are the teacher, you know it all, you are the authority, and I'm here to just be spoon-fed by your wisdom, then that would alienate me from myself, because it creates distrust. It creates within the relationship, but also within myself. Oh, I need to ask Alan so that I get the answer. And when I was in that mind frame, you came back to me with I don't know mind. And so you supported, a mutual inquiry. So together we explore. And so you help me in that moment to reconnect with life. So that for me is an application right there.
Well, thank you for making it personal and bringing me into it. Yeah. Well, this being aware and making choices with wisdom and discernment is very much at the core of MBSR also. But I'm actually curious about something that's talked about in MSC, mindful self-compassion, which is backdraft that occurs when people realize how unself-compassionate they've been, and then that compiles onto more inner critic. So I'm wondering how in NVC, if backdraft occurs, and if it does, how that is talked about.
I love this question because I'm just seeing myself connecting, two things that I had never connected previously. And yes, I think Marshall used to talk about, different states of development or integration of NVC. And one level is what he called the obnoxious state. So that is the state where, okay, I get, exposed to NVC. I learn that not just generally human beings have needs, but I have needs. And so in the particular, I as a woman am allowed to have needs. And my needs are not just to support others and, take care of others, but I can also care for my own personal needs, for my own growth and learning and self-care and all of, oh, wow. And then all of a sudden it becomes all about me. So that is the obnoxious state. So I use the practice to serve my own needs. And so I'm still not in the mind frame of interdependence, which is the foundation of what I understand to be the consciousness behind the practice of MBC that we want to cultivate.
And it kind of leads me to when I read Marshall's book on nonviolent communication and remembering how he stated this is a lifetime's work. You're not going to get it in one reading. However, given that, I still would go ahead and in the communication class in MBSR class 6, often bring NVC to the participants in a very shorthand way. And maybe I will state that, which I'm sure you could state, a lot clearer, but basically around the 4 steps of observation, feeling, needs, and requests. So maybe you could, I'll step back and maybe you could just talk about that kind of shorthand look.
Yes. So again, those are also 4 of the 25 key distinctions. So one is observation and evaluation, which for me speaks exactly of mindfulness. So what is it that I observe through my, so what is the sensory experience, what I see, what I hear, what I taste, and what I see myself thinking as the, 6th sense door in Buddhist psychology, and how quickly the mind goes into evaluating. So the classical example, real life example I give of, and she's fully okay with me sharing, my 17-year-old daughter, I enter her room, and what I see myself thinking is, oh my goodness, she's so messy, or this room is a mess. But so with NVC, I'm invited to ask myself, okay, what is it that I observe? And so the towel on the floor, the trousers on the bed, the socks hanging somewhere. So that helps me to really focus on what is, the stimulus of my experience, and what is it that I'm telling myself about it. So it is, so even just that step can be very profound as a practice. And then NVC, so I'm going very fast. The second distinction is feelings and thoughts. So what is it that I'm feeling? So when I see, the dirty socks on the floor. And I feel exhausted because I so long for some, sense of cleanliness and order. So I go to my needs, right? So the feelings and the needs, and I move away from the thinking mind into my, sense felt experience. And then the fourth step, so the difference between, the key differentiations between needs and strategies. So I wanna, because the strategies are concrete and the needs are universal. So if I have a need for, some sense of cleanliness, that is something that I share with my daughter, but the way we go around it is different. So when she was younger and I would ask her, 4-step the request, and my request would not be as clear, I would say, can you make order in your room? And, an hour later, I would see that she pushed everything under her bed. And that was her bed, Mom, the room is in order. Well, that's not what I mean by order, but here we are. So the strategies, are different, but the need is the same. So then, MVC invites us to be clear and to say what we want rather than what we don't want. So are you willing to put the dirty clothes in the hamper and straighten the bed? And so that, she could understand what is it that I would like.
It's a delightful example. So I'm left with 2 questions, and one is close to home, interpersonally, and also in our communications. With the holidays coming up and Thanksgiving, Christmas, and our getting together with family and friends, and the possibility that we're not going to see the world through the same perspective and in the same way. And any thoughts you might share with us as to how we might move through those moments?
Briefly, for me, one would be staying really mindful of the intention. So, reminding myself that my intention is to connect with my loved ones and to build memories that we can treasure in our hearts, despite difficulties and, yes, different points of view or around life, politics, whatever it is. Yeah. So that is one. So really, yeah. And so asking myself, is connection served in this moment, or do I want to make a different choice? So that is one. And the other is really, to stay connected also to the fact that, well, 2 things perhaps. One is that, every behavior is an attempt to meet a need, which is one of the principles of MBC. So our attachment to views is a behavior that is trying to meet some needs, maybe a need for predictability, security, whatever it is. So humanizing even those, behaviors in others or in ourselves, when I want to be right about who should, be president or whatever. And then that, yes, underneath the different strategies, we all have the same needs. So we all long for love, for belonging, for well-being, for happiness.
And, I'm reminded, as you said that, of something you said to me the other week, which is that any statement is either a please statement or a thank you statement, which is so enlightening to me to hear that. And, looking at my communication, it's so true. So maybe you could just speak towards that a little bit.
Yeah, that is also, something that Marshall left us with. And he used to say that all communication is either a please or a thank you. So when I say to Alan, oh, he's the most wonderful, mentor in the whole world, that is a thank you, right? It's gratitude.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it doesn't give Alan any information about what is it that he did or said that contributed to me. So being more specific. So Alan, when you explored, topics with me rather than giving me an answer, you invited me to stay connected to myself or something like that. And the please is, whenever we experience anger or whatever it is, or the other person comes with intense emotion to us, can I see that as a please? Please listen to me. Please, this is important to me. That is why I get angry. So the person is not able to say all that, but behind it, And so what happens in the brain, as much, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I enjoy reading some neuroscience. What it does, shifting from, hearing the anger to hearing a please, is that I don't perceive it as a threat anymore. And so we all know, the power of perceptions and perceiving something as a threat, and how that, initiates the fight, flight, freeze response. And so, shifting the perception to, oh, this is a please, can completely shift our physiology.
Yeah, we don't have to get reactive, taking it out of the personal and seeing the request that's actually underneath that anger. Yeah. Oh, if I remember one thing, I love to remember this. Well, on the big picture question, and this is the last one, how do you view communication evolving with younger generations within, you spoke earlier about the discourse in society, all the othering that's going on, and the way we're speaking to each other, given the internet, and when on in the same room, I think it's easier to talk in a language that is harmful. So anyways, I'd love to hear your views on this.
I notice that when you bring that up, I'm connected to some sense of discouragement, because more and more, we have, more and more impactful means of communication, TV, internet, and especially the internet, all those social media and all of that. And so how those are used on one hand, and how that kind of communication and rhetoric can, contribute to disconnection, to a sense of separation, of othering, of, the other person is a threat, and the us versus them. And so I want to, balance that also with, yes, and, in many ways, there is so much more awareness of impacts of communication. We do talk about microaggressions nowadays, and, who was speaking about that a few years ago? Certainly, it was not as understood, at least in white communities. I speak with my kids. They range, 17 to 25, as I said, and I have a 21-year-old in the middle. They have an awareness of, impacts of communication that I didn't have at their age. So that for me is very hopeful. And it brings me back to the story of the two wolves, and who wins? The one we feed. So can we continue feeding what we want to see in the world, even when we do see the enormous, humongous impacts of certain dynamics? Power dynamics really goes back to what we are sharing in the beginning.
Yeah, we're coming full circle.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful for your hope, and in this big picture question, I would say maybe everybody we've had one of these sessions with has landed in hope. And that gives me hope, and I hope it gives anybody listening to these episodes hope, especially around communications, which are so fundamental to understanding. So thank you for the hope, Stephanie. Thank you for your being with us here today, your time, especially your wisdom, your insights. This book, which I know is going to be a tremendous, amazing gift to anybody interested in nonviolent communication. You really do get to the heart of it.
Mm.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be with you, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Network on Facebook, where you are invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio. Ring the bell so you don't miss out on future recordings.